luckily for him, it's on the T-bone. The city takes care of that one. And Cedar Lee. Yeah, so nearby.
You guys have the vote.
I still like it.
It's, they usually have a good selection of movies often. I think it's 100. They celebrated their 100th this year. Yep. Actually, it was just before the Depression. So,
How many different owners?
Foreman owned it, and I don't know if he still does, but they expanded and they contracted. Well, it's been rough movie theaters lately. Yeah. People are, what do you call it? I guess that's from the book.
Hey, Jordan,
Probably.
thanks for checking. Thanks for checking the room.
Not really.
Oh, yeah, this is all on there.
What? Get out that way, but it's probably not for something. Oh, okay.
How are you guys?
Do you have a microphone?
Order food to
Good.
I'm always worried about those kind of things. No, I was about forward. Please. Back to the bed.
Pruning my bookshelves. A couple of chairs and light.
Oh, okay. Yeah, home I could fall asleep easily. Who would fall asleep? The books, the things.
Ah, it's a little warm, yeah.
It's stuffy. Let me see what I can do. I'll get a message to someone.
Oh, that's nice.
I can take a picture of the back of this piano. I'll be right back.
Okay, very good. How are you? Handout is right there. See it?
You know where you are?
Right. I mean, they have some similar.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Nice to see you all. I asked for this setup, like I said, just the way it's been in the past. And you guys in left field are way out in left field. Be nice if we would pull it in, but we'll do it next time. I like that more intimate sense, but nevertheless. So it's very good to see everybody for our sessions on Rabbi Sachs's Not in God's Name. If you've been reading the book, it is pretty thick, a lot going on in the book. As I said in my message last night or yesterday afternoon, a couple of people had asked me to do some preliminary summary, which I'm going to do, especially today, because the first chapter is also pretty complex, but I think it's important to do. So a little bit of announcements and so on. If you did not get an email from me last night. Either I don't have your correct address. How many got the email? Oh, okay. I don't think I left you off intentionally.
We didn't, we probably didn't register with your secretary.
Okay, so call in your email address to my assistant Cindy. It's not crucial that you be on the list because you'll come when you can. I mean, but what I do in this email is I just indicate again when the next session is and what we're going to be looking at, what pages and chapter. So I try to convey some information, but I'm not taking attendance, that's for sure. But it would be good to have a list. I have a list and I've added some people since, so let Cindy know your email address if you will. 5 sessions. The next session is next week. I think I did indicate that in the mailing. In the last set of sessions was on Alan Levinson's Modern Jewish Thinkers, and we spent 14 or 15 sessions on it, I think very productively. Why did I start saying that? Because we essentially were trying to do every other week so that we'd have a sense of a pattern. But given the summer and I'm going to be in and out of town, it's just not going to really work on that kind of logic. So I think I indicated in the mailing when the next sessions are. I will be sending on a Sunday before the Monday what we're doing. I have had photocopied, as many of you have, the first chapter because I know in talking to some of you that you didn't have the book yet. I want to be sure that we all have the material in front of us. I don't think I'm going to do it from now on. You see the hesitation. Be good if you had a book, but it's not imperative, and if you don't want to do it, I'll try to compensate for it. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to begin looking at this book and the material in the first chapter. So any questions about anything so far that we've talked about, kind of logistics? Ellen?
My first question is, it says, the very first sentence is very striking, that God leaves.
Yeah.
Why did God tell the people to kill every living person?
What I'd like to do is to kind of present some things just so that we can open up the book together rather than just having Q&A at the beginning, which is going to be unsystematic, so to speak. I'd like to try to get to what it is Sachs is up to here. So let's turn first to page 5. And he says here in the second paragraph, to begin, to invoke God to justify violence against the innocent is not an act of sanctity, but of sacrilege. It is a kind of blasphemy. It is to take God's name in vain. So this is a bit of an elaboration on the title, not in God's name. And he begins with something that is obvious. God should not be a sponsor of violence, especially violence against the innocent. But this whole book is about the way in which religion does and does not find itself complicit in acts of violence. So he starts out with a kind of premise, which is going to be under duress, under pressure from this book. Let's turn to page 23. I'm going back and forth here. So he says, second paragraph, To put the argument of this book as simply as I can, there is a connection between religion and violence, but it is oblique and not direct. So that is, and I think, an important statement for this book. He's going to make the claim that there is a connection between religion and violence, but it's not a one-to-one correspondence. It's not that religion is the only cause of violence, and oftentimes religion represents an attempt to stop or halt violence or to promote another vision. Page 29. So he says here, I'm looking at the third paragraph, the third starting point. The third starting point, a religious one, is the one with which this book began. How is it that people kill in the name of the God of life, wage war in the name of the God of peace, hate in the name of the God of love, and practice cruelty in the name of the God of compassion? So, these would not be legitimate questions were we not to feel that religion is complicit in all these things in some way or another. Let's look at it again. How is it that people kill in the name of God, the God of life, wage war in the name of the God of peace, hate in the name of the God of love, and practice cruelty in the name of the God of compassion? How, if we are the image of God, do we so often harm the work of God, especially our fellow humans? So you can see that he's pointing to the need for some nuanced and elaborate argument. Why is it and how is it? What is it about religion that leads to frequent complicity in acts of violence, crusades, jihads, and so on, while on the other hand, religion is not the only factor? Let's see, page 11. Down near the bottom, 5 lines up from the bottom. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam define themselves as religions of peace, yet they've all given rise to violence at some points in their history. Okay? And it's obvious, but it's worth pointing out, that a book written by a rabbi is going to include Judaism in this, let's call it, indictment. But what kind of an indictment is it going to be? So these couple of passages that I've read are, in a way, attempts to say what it is this book is going to be about. And it's going to be about the relationship between religion and violence, but in an oblique or nuanced way. So, one of his technical terms is altruistic evil, which seems to be an oxymoron. Altruism would seem to be generosity, sympathy, empathy. How can such a gesture promote evil? So, and he does use technical terms from time to time, which we have to be sure to understand. So let's go back to page 9. Near the bottom, we need a term. We need a term to describe this deadly phenomenon that can turn ordinary, non-psychopathic people into cold-blooded murderers of school children, aid workers, journalists, and people at prayer. Baruch Goldstein, right, who went into the mosque in Hebron, and massacred a bunch of Jews. with a kippah on his head and having attended the yeshiva. We need a term, I'm going to read it again, to describe this deadly phenomenon that can turn ordinary non-psychopathic people into cold-blooded murderers of school children, aid workers, journalists, and people at prayer. It is, to give it a name, altruistic evil. Evil committed in a sacred cause in the name of high ideals. Okay? So evil committed with, we might say, conditions of some commitment to something and doing evil in that framework. So altruism, positive connection to some ideal, which to them is consistent with the promotion of violence. Let's look at page 10, second paragraph. There is nothing specifically religious about altruistic evil. Some of the great instances of modern history, Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, Mao Zedong's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, were avowedly secular, okay? So, right here, he makes a distinction between two forms of altruistic evil, religious, but also secular ideologies can lead to the very same phenomenon. And what this suggests to me is that religion is not the only impulse. Religion isn't the only context in which these acts of violence take place. So the question is now going to be, does religion play a role in certain kinds of social, economic, political situations? Are there a multiplicity of factors, some economic situations, some sociological, social situations make the use of religion more probable? Page 23. Okay. So that's a passage I just read, but it is oblique, not direct, which suggests other factors at work. Page 11. Very bottom of the page. No, the paragraph near the bottom that begins, the third is a classic instance of in-group bias. Okay, so here's an example of his pointing to another sort of factor than religion. Something in the sociology of groups makes a group and the members of a group to feel in some way they're better than some outside. And though this may not be true, there is what he calls an in-group bias. I tend to excuse behavior or thoughts in my group that I may not in another group. The third is a classic instance of ingrown bias. Almost invariably, people regard their group as superior to others. Now, notice, I think this is an interesting point in and of itself, but what I make of it here at the beginning of our discussion is the different factors that play into the possible use of religion, okay? So it's going to have something to do with feeling that my group is superior to your group. And this is oftentimes the cause of religious wars. I'm doing God's work because I'm God's chosen and you're not. That's religion as an instance, as an instrument for the sense of the superiority of one's own group. Okay? And there are many other factors here that he is going to point to. Let's go on. Almost invariably, people regard their group as superior to others. Harry Toffel, one of the pioneers of social identity theory. So one of the things that makes this book complex is he's drawing a lot of threads into the material. Social identity theory showed how deeply this runs in even the most trivial of groupings. In one experiment, he divided people into groups on the basis of the mere toss of a coin, yet they still rated the members of their own group as more likable than the others, despite the fact that they had never met one another before and knew that they had been selected on a purely random basis. Groups, like individuals, have a need for self-esteem, and they will interpret facts to confirm their sense of their superiority. And here's a brief list of some of the other factors he brings into the calculus. The advent of printing, the internet, which disseminates information very fast and leads to a kind of acceleration, a crescendo of emotion. Talks about narrowcasting as opposed to broadcasting. Broadcasting, sending out something into the void. Narrowcasting, sending messages to specific in groups, and so on. Page 29. The third starting point, we've read this already, but it's the beginning of a longer passage now, is the one with which the book began. How is it that people kill in the name of the God of life, wage war in the name of the God of peace, hate in the name of the God of love, practice cruelty in the name of the God of compassion? How, if we are the image of God, do we so often harm the work of God, especially our fellow humans? The answer in its essentials was given by Darwin himself. Okay? Another example of drawing different disciplines, different perspectives into this complex phenomenon. The answer in its essentials was given by Darwin himself. In The Descent of Man, he wrote, there can be no doubt that a tribe including many members who, from possessing in high degree the spirit of patriotism, fidelity, obedience, courage, and sympathy, were always ready to aid one another and to sacrifice themselves for the common good, would be victorious over most other tribes. And this would be natural selection, a group's capacity to survive. We are social animals. We hand on our genes as individuals, but we survive only in groups. Nor is this unique to humans. Ants, bees, most mammals scout, feed, and live in groups. In the wild, the individual separated from the group is essentially dead. The lone individual is the one that gets eaten by the lion. Supremely, this is the evolutionary advantage of Homo sapiens. We are the most effective of all life forms in creating and sustaining groups. We are the most social of animals. Indeed, according to many biologists, it was for the sake of enhancing this ability that we developed language. It's also the reason for our prodigious brain size, a full 300% larger than our evolutionary ancestors. We cooperate and we compete. We cooperate in order to compete. One man will not survive against a lion, but 10 or 100 might if they formed an effective team. Their greatest danger would then be posed not by a predator, but by another human group in pursuit of the same scarce resources. food, shelter, and territory. The stronger the group, the more chance it has against rivals. In the Darwinian struggle to survive, the most cohesive team, adept in coordinating its various talents and tasks, will live to fight another day. It follows that we have two sets of instincts, honed and refined by many centuries of evolutionary history. One set, Darwin's patriotism, fidelity, obedience, courage, and sympathy, inclines us in the direction of altruism. We work for the good of the group because our viability depends on it. The stronger the group, the greater our chances of surviving to beget further generations. As Darwin said, this would be natural selection. The other set, our most basic reactions of aggression, fear, anger, and combativeness, our willingness to fight and inflict injuries on others, shapes our relationship with rival groups competing with us for scarce resources. The speed and force of these reactions are vital to our success in the competitive arena of natural selection. So we are angels and demons. Okay? Notice, he's drawing this inference from something of analysis of human nature and human groupishness. This is not yet religion. This is something we might say deeper, more basic. We are angels and demons. Angels to those on our side, demons to those on the other side. This follows from the human and wider than human instinct to form groups. Groups unite and divide. They divide as they unite. Every group involves the coming together of multiple individuals to form a collective us. But every us is defined against a them, the ones not like us. The one without the other is impossible. Inclusion and exclusion go hand in hand. He's going to talk later in the book about attempts to surmount this dualism. Okay? So, for example, St. Paul and Christianity. We are all human beings. There's neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. That's a quote from one of his letters. But we're all one, so for him, in Christ Jesus. So this was an attempt on early Christianity to overcome the division of people into groups and to try for one united humanity. The Enlightenment in the late 18th century, 19th century, was an attempt to show that we all have one important attribute, and that is reason. And if we used our reason and said to ourselves what Immanuel Kant said, that we ought to be able to tell what actions are right or wrong by using our reason, a universal attribute of one universal humanity. The Enlightenment's attempt to unify, okay? So what he's pointing to is that though this us versus them seems to be ubiquitous, common, that there have been attempts to surmount it, okay? Monotheism is another attempt. We are all children of the same God. We're all made in the image of God. Okay? So this is an attempt to surmount what Sachs here is saying is pretty common, the us versus them. So we could say, even this early on, that religion plays a role in both dividing us and potentially uniting us. It can be a source for bad, it can be a source for good. Let's go on here. Second paragraph on page 31. Here then is the source of both violence and altruism. Darmod's question is answered. Altruism plays a major role in survival of the group. We are all friends with one another, those of us in this group. Whether natural selection operates at the level of the individual or whether there's such a thing as group selection has been and remains a hotly debated topic within biology. But there's no doubt that the survival of individuals depends on the willingness of members of the group to take risks and make sacrifices for the good of the group as a whole, okay? Soldiers at war who are either willing or compelled to fight to put themselves in danger for the well-being of the group. Patriotism, as some call it. This is the biological function of the better angels of our nature. The same applies in the reverse direction, explaining why, when reason or emotion inclines us to morality, human evil exists. Our inclination to act well toward others, whatever its source, tends to be confined to those with whom we share a common identity. The Greeks, the world's first philosophers and scientists, regarded anyone who was not a Greek as a barbarian, a word derived from the sound of a sheep bleating. Barbar, barbar, barbar. Okay? Our radius of moral concern, you know what a radius is, a line from the center out to the periphery. So how big a radius? How big a group? The bigger the circle, the bigger the radius. That's what he's pointing to. Our radius of moral concern has limits. The group may be large or small, but in practice, as opposed to theory, we tend to see those not like us as less than fully human. The same is true of religion. The world's great faiths have said sublime things about love, compassion, sacrifice, and charity. But these noble sentiments have often been confined to fellow believers, or at least potential fellow believers, against non-believers, members of another faith, or of none, and those of our own faith, we deem to be heretics. Religions can be brutal and pitiless. Okay? Next page. I'm in the first paragraph, 3 lines up from the end, beginning, it is neither secularism nor religious belief that makes us what we are, the curious mixture of good and bad that can lead us to the moral heights or the savage depths. It is our groupishness. You see what he's driving at here? When he says that religion is complicitous, but its connection to violence is oblique, what he's suggesting is it has to be unpacked. And here he has unpacked it in one particular way. Beneath the work of religions is something more fundamental, or at least very fundamental. And that is our proclivity to find safety in numbers, our groupishness, okay? So before he gets to religion's role, he is already crafting a kind of context of complex elements. Amy, quickly, we're not, yeah, go ahead. That's okay.
Did you address that Darwin uses the word tribe?
Pride, P-R-I-D. Tribe, mm-hmm.
And Sachs chooses group.
And what's the difference?
The difference is, to me, group is a softer, more amorphous choice.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Elephant, and he focuses on the tribal aspect.
Yeah. So I think that, and this is just a stab at it, tribe is more pejorative than group. I don't think he's making the case that groups are always tribal. but that groups can be tribal, especially in the context of other groups. And when there are scarce resources, then groups become tribes. I think that's what he would say. So I think he wants to talk about groups because, after all, what he's doing here, he's laying the foundation of how we act, for better or worse. So he doesn't want to load the dice yet. I think that's what's happening. Next page, page 33. How would any animal, I'm 4 or 5 lines down, how would any animal, let alone a human being, come to form an association with non-related others if self-interest always defeats the common good? So here he's raising Darwin's point about, since the fundamental mechanism is the survival of the fittest, and since I care most about my own survival, how is it that I join together with others in common activities? So he wants to talk about that too. This was the starting point of Hobbes' famous account of life in a state of nature, in which there was continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. What stops people fighting one another for long enough to create an association? Now he gets into a very interesting digression. I don't know if you've, those of you who've read the book, you came upon the prisoner's dilemma. Okay. And the prisoner's dilemma essentially is, so if 2 people commit a robbery, and they're captured and they're brought into the interrogation room, each in a different room, what would be their ordinary reaction to what's going on here? The typical idea would be that prisoner A is going to blame prisoner B, and prisoner B is going to try to blame prisoner A, which, according to Sachs, leads to an even greater sentence than if they remain silent. What would allow them to do the more favorable thing and remain silent? Because if I'm sitting there and Steve is in the other room, and they ask me, well, what happened? And I'm not going to talk. The problem is, I don't know that Steve might not say, but Klein did it. So what's going to get us to surmount our concern about ourselves alone and try to do better for the group? And he makes the point about the golden rule. Do unto others what you would like them to do unto you. And what in that circumstance I would like the other prisoner to do is to be silent. And therefore, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That one was silent about my complicity. I'm going to be silent there. And we both have a lighter sentence. So what he's suggesting here is this prisoner's dilemma model is a way in which we might get out of our egotism, our self-regard above all things, and be concerned for something, someone outside my own group. So he's trying to move from the idea of Hobbes's state of nature. Those who've read the Hobbes Leviathan, the state of nature is the state of war, of all against all. And the only way we can keep from killing one another is to promote a certain individual as an absolute monarch, because violence is our fallback position. What leads to cooperation? So he's asking another question beyond religion about the need for groupishness, for self-protection. Okay, so I'm going to turn to page 34. So now we're going to we've looked at altruistic evil. My group tends to want something bad for you, especially over and against scarce resources if we're competitors. Now, what about what he calls reciprocal altruism? Altruism to other members of my group. So, page 34. This solves, second paragraph, the Darwinian dilemma of how non-genetically related individuals, his point here is, I tend to be more protective of my own family, my own genes, because one of my impulses is to try to get my genes into the next generation. And to do that, I have to promote the interests of my genes, my family, over your genes. So, this solves the Darwinian dilemma of how non-genetically related individuals can cooperate to form groups. If you do to others what you expect them to do for you, share food, give warning of impending danger and the like, then the group will function effectively and survive. If not, you will be punished by reprisals and possible exclusion from the group. Biologists call this reciprocal altruism. Some deny that this is altruism at all. It is self-interest rightly understood, or what Bishop Butler called cool self-love. I love that. Cool self-love. But the terminology is neither here nor there. This is the simple basis of the moral life. If you start with benevolence, then apply the rules of reciprocity, you create a basis on which group trust can form in groups. For this, you don't need religion. All social animals work this out, because those who do not survive. I hope it's clear, I've said it a couple of times, why it's important to lay this foundation. Because he's going to make the claim that as potent as religion is, there are other sources for the kind of violence that we see in societies. Religion plays a role for sure, but it's not the only. And he makes the point somewhere in these early chapters that to say that if you eliminate religion, you're going to eliminate violence is a mistake because of the other factors that he is pointing to. So you can see he's trying to contextualize religion in a larger constellation of ideas and factors. Okay, page 35. How then, second paragraph, did humans develop much larger concentrations of population? How did they create cities and civilization? Reciprocal altruism creates trust between neighbors, people who meet repeatedly and know about one another's character. It's an extension of the prisoner's dilemma. The birth of the city posed a different and much greater problem. In other words, small communities where there is face-to-face interaction, that's really can be seen as an extended family, a network of people familiar with one another, right? We walk down to the drugstore, we talk to the druggist, and we do it over and over again. And this becomes a person who is in my family. So then he says, but the birth, at the end of a line, of the city posed a different and much greater problem. How do you establish trust between strangers? This was the point at which culture took over from nature, and religion was born. That is, religion in the sense of an organized social structure with myths, rituals, sacred times and places, temples, and a priesthood. Recall that we're speaking in evolutionary, not theological terms. Regardless of whether we regard religion as true or false, It clearly has adaptive value because it appeared at the dawn of civilization and has been a central feature of almost every society since. The early religions created communities, thus solving the problem of trust between strangers. You see the argument here? They sanctified the social order. In other words, religion as an instrument for something more basic and desirable. The social order of people who are not face-to-face individuals. And religion, whether true or false, he's talking about not the intrinsic value of religion, but the instrumental value of religion for doing this. That's that beginning of that paragraph again. The early religions created moral communities, thus solving the problem of trust between strangers. They sanctified the social order. They taught people that society is as it is because this is the will of the gods and the basic structure of the universe. The fundamental theme of early religion in Mesopotamia and Egypt was the tension between cosmos and chaos. We don't need to work on that. Let's turn the page about halfway down, right after the indented quote. There is no biological mechanism capable of yielding order on such a scale. Ants manage it because within groups and roles, they are clones of one another. They operate by kin selection. Humans are different from one another. That is what makes cooperation between them so difficult and so powerful when it happens. This is when something new and distinctively human emerges. Learned habits of behavior take over from evolved instinctual drives. Rituals make their appearance. Socialization becomes a fundamental part of the education of the young. There are roles, rules, codes of conduct. The habits necessary to the maintenance of the group become internalized. We are the culture-creating, meaning-seeking animal. Homo sapiens become homo religious. To go down to the last word on the second last line on the page. Cooperation without kinship. Let's go to that whole paragraph. Such, at any rate, is the argument put forward by a group of evolutionary scholars, among them those guys. They point, among other things, to the research of Richard Sosis and so on. Communes are a good example. All right, we've done that. Let's continue on the next page. Well, it's the bottom of 36. Sosis found that 6% of secular communes were still in existence 20 years after their founding, as compared with 39% of religious ones. In a follow-up study, he found the more demanding the religious group, the longer its lifespan. Religion creates and sustains communities. Okay? What do I want to do next? Let's see. Next page. Very top, very first line. As Haidt puts it, whatever its origins, the psychology of sacredness helps bind individuals into moral communities. Many believe that the word religion comes from the Latin religare, meaning to bind. How interesting is that? I mean, we can certainly think of religion as telling us something about the nature of things, what our obligations are, what are the goals of a religious community. These we might call the let me go for it. The inherent meaning of religion. What he's pointing to is the instrumental meaning of religion. And when we're talking about the violence of communities against other communities, we can see that religion plays a role in raising the stakes for a community. This is something that needs to exist because it's been sanctified by the social order and by the worldview. When we do a religious service, I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked at the narrative of the prayer book. There is a story being told at the Friday night service, and that is a worldview and our place in it. Let me give you an example or two. The first prayer before the Shema, thank you for creating the universe. The second prayer, thank you for giving us Torah. That's an example, God, of your love for us. The Shema, you're the only one for us. The V'ahavta, you loved us. We're going to love you by doing your commandments. V'ahavta, from ohev, to love. Okay, so that's a structure of the universe which gives meaning to the group and therefore makes the group more durable because we do this together and we see the value of our groupishness. That may sound slightly pejorative, but that's the point that he is trying to make. Okay, but just a little bit more and then we'll pause. Page 39. We can now answer the question, second paragraph on 39, the question of the relationship between religion and violence, as well as that of the dual nature of human beings, capable of great good, but also of great evil. We are good and bad because we're human. We're social animals, and we live, survive, and thrive in groups. Within groups, we practice altruism. Between them, we practice aggression. Religion enters the equation. I'm going to pause on that phrase right there. The equation pre-exists, and religion enters it. This is part of the fundamental argument that he's making. Religion enters the equation only because it is the most powerful force ever devised for the creation and maintenance of large-scale groups by solving the problem of trust between strangers. So, religion supports, bolsters, raises the stakes for the value of the group to its members. Under threat, since religion authorizes the value of our group, we're much more likely to strike out against the threat than we might be if religion hadn't given the imprimatur to the value of the group. Violence, next paragraph, has nothing to do with religion as such. It has to do with identity and life in groups. Religion sustains groups more effectively than any other force. It suppresses violence within. It rises to the threat of violence from without. Most conflicts and wars have nothing to do with religion whatsoever. They're about power, territory, and glory, things that are secular, even profane. But if religion can be enlisted, it will be. Now, when he talked at the beginning about the relationship between religion and violence as oblique, complex, here is an unfolding of the complexity. Most conflicts, middle of that paragraph, and wars have nothing to do with religion whatsoever. They are about power, territory, and glory, things that are secular, even profane. Namely, is religion responsible for violence? No, not exclusively. There are other motivations. But If religion can be enlisted, it will be. So, fundamental realities, but when religion enters the picture, it can play a role, okay? If then violence has to do with identity, why not abolish identity? Why divide humanity into them and us? And this is something I raised a little earlier. You can see the next paragraph. There have been 3 major attempts in history to realize this dream, and it is immensely important to understand why they fail. The first was Pauline Christianity, right? St. Paul, who wrote 7 authentic letters and 6, I think, that scholars think are secondary. Next page. The second attempt was the European Enlightenment, which I've already pointed out. The first 2 attempts, bottom of the page, were universalists, a universal religion or a universal culture, Paul or Kant. The third attempt, the one we have been living through for the past half century, is the opposite. It's the effort to eliminate identity by abolishing groups altogether and instead enthroning the individual. The contemporary West is the most individualistic era of all time. Its central values are, in ethics, autonomy; in politics, individual rights; in culture, postmodernism; and in religion, spirituality. Its idol is the self, its icon the selfie, and its operating systems the free market and the post-ideological, managerial, liberal, democratic state. Next paragraph. No civilizational order like this has ever appeared before, and we can only understand it in light of the traumatic failure of the 3 substitutes for religion: nationalism, communism, and race. We are now living through the discontents of individualism, and have been since the 70s. Identity has returned, that is, a sense of group identity. The tribes are back and fighting more fiercely than ever. The old sources of conflict, religion and ethnicity, are claiming new victims. The anti-modern radicals have learned that you can use the products of modernity without going through the process that produced them, namely westernization, and so on. Okay, so he's pointing to the fact that religion, and we know this, has returned sometimes with a vengeance, okay? And therefore, we're all the more confronted with this question of religion's role in the proliferation of violence. Let's just look at page 42 quickly, and then we'll have some conversation. Second paragraph. Vast research since the events of September 11, 2001 have shown that jihadists and suicide bombers are not, for the most part, people driven by poverty or social exclusion. They have no recognizable psychological profile. They're not psychopathic, nor are they driven by religious extremism as such. Many of them didn't have a religious education. As children, they didn't attend madrasas, and some of them know very little about Islam. If they're suffering from anything, it is from what they see as emptiness, meaninglessness, materialism, and narcissism of the contemporary West and the corruption of secular regimes. Bottom of the page. We have seen in this chapter how altruism leads us to make sacrifices for the sake of the group, while at the same time leading us to commit acts of violence against perceived threats to the group. Good and bad, altruism and aggression, peace and violence, love and hate, are born together as the twin consequences of our need to define ourselves as an us in opposition to a them. Oh, but we have a further way to go, he says. Something more than simple identity is needed for good people to commit truly evil deeds. Okay, So that was an attempt to kind of summarize what I take to be a somewhat complicated chapter. So let's talk. What do you think? What thoughts do you have about all of this? Gary?
I'd like to start with the title.
Yep.
The title is peculiar, odd to me, because they're antonyms.
Say that again now?
The title,
Yes?
altruistic evil, it's
Uh-huh.
a peculiar title. It's odd to me,
Al-
because they're antonyms.
Right. So, you know, what he's pointing to is the willingness of individuals in a group to perpetrate evil in some way or another for the sake of the benefit of the group. I'm altruistic about my group, and therefore I'm willing to perpetrate evil on a threat in order to be altruistic. It's altruism and violence at the same point. It's altruism in its use in violence. Other thoughts? Yeah, Linda?
Question. I first read the Bible during COVID. I took that course, A Hole in One, that Siegel author.
Okay.
And I was really shocked to read that God, the notion that God was a God of love and compassion, it didn't come across that way in the Bible. And if I'm remembering properly, when the Israelites are about to enter the land of Canaan, doesn't God tell them to go down there and kill every last one of them? Because if you don't kill them, you're going to intermarry with them and they will lead you into idolatry. So that's my recollection. Is that correct?
Oh, I think it is correct. I mean, one could slightly change it. So either kill them or exile them, kick them off the
I
land.
think you said kill.
Well, there are passages which say, but nevertheless, God is the author of violence, the source of violence, right? So, you know, what Sachs says about it, and I'm smiling because it's something of an evasion, although he's willing to face the realities here, I think you can see that the violence, and especially the divine authorized violence, is front-loaded in the Bible.
Yeah.
When you begin to get later on, especially into the prophets or the Psalms and so on, the violence comes away. So I think what he wants to say, I think he has said that here somewhere, is that the biblical editors, as opposed to the authors, the editors who put it all together, have in a way made progress from violence toward something more pacific.
But that's in there, and I can see how other religions, our religions can seize on that and say,
Right.
it's justified.
Right.
Violence.
And so it makes sense in terms of his analysis, though, doesn't it? Let's suppose the group, let's just think back behind the text, that the group is going into the promised land and they know that when they're coming in to conquer, they're not going to be welcomed. So the question is, what is the rationale for the conquest? Well, we need some land or something else. But if God authorizes the conquest, this gives an absolute warrant to it. And I think what Sachs is going to want to say here is we understand that dynamic in the way in which religion is often in support of altruistic evil. But a careful reading, and this is what he does near the end of the book, of some of these problematic texts will show that there is something of a way out. So I think he wants to have it both ways. Look, I mean, I think that he's constructing something of a narrative of the use of violence in religion, that religion both naturally exploits violence to protect itself over and against real or perceived threats. But religion also promotes the God of love. It also is a monotheism. I mean, he makes the distinction at the beginning of the book between polytheism and monotheism. And polytheism especially is a high, so there are two aspects to polytheism. What's happening in the heavens and what's happening on earth. And the logic is what's happening in the heavens is the source of or a mirror of what is warrantable on earth. There's a hierarchy of gods in the heavens. They're the chief gods, they're the subordinate gods. As it is in heaven, so it is on earth, which then becomes a rationale for hierarchical absolute societies. When you have one God in your system, it's by definition non-hierarchical, especially since this God is not really involved in the struggles among the gods. And therefore it makes room for one God, one humanity. Many gods, you think of the Homeric epics, where different gods are supporting different heroes, right? Achilles is supported by, I don't know, Athena or something like that. So if you have many gods, you can have conflict in the heavens, which in a way mirrors the conflicts on earth. Monotheism, so his point here is that, let me make the point I would like him to have made, and maybe he makes it. Look, if the Bible tells us about life, and it does it oftentimes in uncompromising ways, it's going to have to tell us about wars and about the ways in which divinities support wars, for better or for worse. But it has another logic to it. That's the logic of monotheism, where we have one God, one humanity, which then lays the foundation for feeling the oneness of all people. After all, Genesis begins before there are communities by saying that each individual is made in the image of God. So the Bible, in a way, is a dialectical text. The yes and the no. Yes, violence. No, we're not going to authorize it till the end of our lives. We're going to try to struggle against it. A dialectical narrative is one in which the yes and the no aren't just sitting there in isolated ways. They fight against each other. Yes, God authorizes wars, but no, God feels that all human beings are of absolute worth. The one thing I can't do, or we can't do, is to save those texts entirely.
To save them?
To save them. That is, they're not as ugly as they look. I mean, God is quoted as, go in there and massacre the Canaanites. What are you going to do about that? Ultimately, nothing. Except if that's X, we can say, but there's not X also in the text. Ellen?
Is there a possibility, I was going to ask the same question, is there a possibility that we created God to justify, we're going to go in and kill all the Canaanites? Or in this passage at least.
Yeah, so, but you remember that Sachs says, whatever you think about religion, good or bad, we recognize that religion is an instrument for the society's well-being. Well, that's very close to saying that human beings make religion. Now, he shouldn't say just that, because I think he also is trying to say that there's great value in religion, and there's such a thing as transcendent values. I mean, the religion gives us a view of the universe and our role in it. But also, I think he wants to say it has intrinsic value and instrumental value, and his task here is less to draw out the implications of its intrinsic value. This is not a book of theology. this is really a book about politics. I mean, he does say near the beginning that he's interested in politicized religion, the uses of religion. So he's emphasizing this without denying the intrinsic value. Yeah.
To what extent did if we go, because I don't, did the ultra-right wingers in Israel, like Spotrich, explicitly rely on those provisions of the Torah to say these apply now and justify what we're doing, as opposed to saying we're doing it in a defensive?
To what degree are they playing with, depending on these issues, these in the Bible?
Right.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I don't know enough about how they think to say anything definitive, but I think, at least it's clear to me, that they believe, the religious among them, that the land of Israel was given to the Jews by God, and that, look, once God gives something, until God takes it back, the land is ours. And you know, that of course was part of the reason that the Jews survived so long in exile, because they believed that part of the drama of history couldn't end until God brought us back. Where? To the land that's always been ours. Hey, by the way, folks, for 2,000 years you didn't live on the land. We don't care. The possession of the land is timeless. And therefore, I think what they're doing is based upon this idea of the non-historical significance of the relationship between the Jews and the land. This is an eternal relationship that's not dependent at all on the ups and downs of history. Now, look, there's also such a thing as secular radical nationalism as well. I mean, I think who believe on different grounds. I don't think they're going to justify it with God, but that, look, we've got enemies. They're always going to be enemies. Our neighbors want to kill us. They always have wanted to kill us. And therefore, we have an absolutely right to survive, and we have to do what's necessary to survive. And if it means taking the whole of the West Bank and Gaza to protect ourselves, we have a justification to do it. Self-preservation is rule number one. So I think they are calling upon, in some way or another, these sorts of things. Yeah. Makes it very difficult to have something like a lasting peace with the other indigenous peoples. Steve?
So I guess this discussion has me thinking about Lincoln's second inaugural,
Yeah.
where he says, woe unto those who commit offenses.
Yeah.
And he gets around to the idea, basically, that God is punishing Americans for either, enabling slavery through the omissions in the Constitution or practicing slavery. Either way, you've allowed this to happen.
Who's the you? Who's the you here?
Americans.
Americans, yeah.
And now you're going to face the consequences.
Yep.
And so, in his interpretation, and this is sort of the second founding of America, because you've strayed away from the principle of equality in the Declaration and the Constitution, right?
Well,
And you better come back, because this is what God is saying you're supposed to do. Is that Enlightenment thinking?
Oh, that's a good point. Gosh, I don't know.
Because the Declaration and the Constitution are products of the Enlightenment.
Yes, but I...
Like Beethoven here.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, the Ninth Symphony. But I think that Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is critical...
This is the second inaugural.
Second inaugural, right, is critical of the Constitution, the 3/5 clause in the Constitution. And he's really trying to promote the superiority of the Declaration of Independence. So in that sense, it's a new founding, because the Constitution is a...
By the amendments, and by the way, the First Amendment was Congress shall make no law
Yeah.
regarding religion. So you're going to stay out of that sphere. We're going to break the connection between power, politics, and religion in the United States.
Yes, but that's also complemented by something else in that first sentence about the right to religion. And so, I mean, if you just focus on that, well, how far does the right for free expression extend to government, and so on? So,
The government is not going to favor one over the other.
no, but there's a tension in that first sentence between the expanse of religion and the limitation of, the possible expanse of religion. Yeah. So is this enlightenment? I would say, I mean, Lincoln was a reader of the Bible, so I think there is some biblical religion there, Genesis chapter 1. Yeah, gosh. I think I've always thought that the most important person in America in the 19th century, the single most important person, was John Wilkes Booth. Had Lincoln lived, it would have turned out very differently, I think. I mean, John Wilkes Booth stopped Reconstruction. I mean, there was Reconstruction, but of course, within 10 years of Lincoln's death, it was over, because Johnson was a Southerner. Gary?
You can also look at James Garfield. With you said a lot of historians agree that if he had lived, things would be differently too.
Say that again, I didn't.
He would have not done with the other presidents that did, and he would have been more than willing to go along with helping black people during Reconstruction.
Who was?
Garfield.
Garfield. Yeah. Johnson, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, what he said about not a version of religion and state, when you look at what the Supreme Court has been ruling with, you're drawing lines from that, where your religion is now being included in the state, especially within school systems.
Yeah. I don't know enough about it, but, yeah. Well, the Supreme Court, ...
They got the Ten Commandments in schools, they're reading.
Oh, sure.
Reading Christian Bible verses in schools.
Yeah.
They now have charter schools that have a religion flavor to it,
Supported
all supported by public money.
by, Well, it's not for nothing that the Heritage Fund cultivated certain individuals, and at least 3 of them are now on the court. We have Mitch McConnell to thank for that, don't we? Other thoughts, Russell?
Yes, so on page 35, where you said that when the city-states culture took over the nation and religion was born.
Where are you?
Page 35.
Yeah.
At the beginning of that third paragraph, this was the point. In which
Okay.
culture took over and
Yep.
religion was born. Well, if you look at Emil Durkheim, he says primitive religion was born in the most primitive aboriginal societies in Australia. So religion was a way of dealing with the environment, dealing with explaining things. Everything was sacred
Yes.
for this group, but not necessarily for the other group.
Yeah.
And religion had a much earlier origin
ah.
than
I see what you're saying. You're suggesting that there's some chronology here in terms of the various factors, that
a very
there's,
different perspective on why and when religion started between Durkheim and between Sachs.
so what Russell is suggesting is, according to my kind of exposition of this, maybe it's not entirely fair to him, is that groupishness comes first, and then groupishness has its dilemmas, and then religion comes on the scene. Whereas you're saying that Durkheim says it's really very, very original.
Families and clans before tribes.
I wonder, though, if this narrative is more logical than chronological. He's unpacking the role of religion as it comes to serve a society. I'm not sure that that implies temporally after. He may be unpacking a logic rather than saying that this comes first, this comes second, this comes third, and then comes religion.
But he says early religions created more community, solving the problem of trust between strangers.
Yes, yes, yes.
But it happened earlier.
Earlier.
Way earlier, so that it wasn't, I think he does it to support this thesis and what he's gonna present. But I don't think we can take it as a given that we have to accept.
They take religion as a given.
As a given that religion sprung out of the need to trust the stranger. Because Aboriginal
Oh,
people
I see what you mean.
had ancestors, had sacred things, and that objects and animals had souls in them. So
It's a good
started
point.
earlier.
So you're saying that Durkheim has a stronger role for religion, that it really is serving a lot of things before it comes to do this sort of thing.
Correct, and it wasn't just a societal construct.
That's an interesting point, because there are two different conclusions one might draw about religion and violence. Durkheim might be willing to say religion is as original a source of violence as anything else, whereas he wants to say religion in some way comes to serve things that precede it. And then you might infer from that religion is less potent than it is for Durkheim.
Yes, and therefore it's got an escape clause for religion.
You have an escape clause for religion. Yeah,
We'll see how things,
we'll see how it unfolds. Yeah, right. Yeah, but the point that I was making earlier, that biblical religion also has very felicitous, positive uses for religion right away, so that you don't have to work to save religion. Religion is already inherently a good thing, as well as, just to go back to Linda's point, a bad thing, a problematic thing. Yeah. Roland?
Yeah, no, I think going back, long time, premise is man doesn't like other man, and they're gonna kill each other. So how are we gonna stop the killing of each other?
Yes.
So we're gonna form a group of some sort to protect ourselves from the others, which is a basic premise in the book.
Yeah.
The good guys and the bad guys. So now we form this something, and we've got to name it. We've got to look and come up with some descriptive reason of why we're good, they're not good.
Yes.
And it all devolves from the basic self-preservation of the group.
Yeah.
And we name it religion. And the thing I don't know anything about, and we're only talking about Western religions anyway, what are the Eastern religions? How do they deal with the same problem? Did they have the same wars? Look at the history of Western Europe from 1500 to the present time. It's a constant war.
That's right.
Religious or not, but they were just fighting for power and glory. And Napoleon was a prime example of that.
Well, there was an attempt. I mean, after all, after the religious wars of the 17th century, you had the Peace of Westphalia, which developed the nation state and the concert of nations as an attempt to put off Kant's notion of perpetual peace through reason. There have been some attempts to do it. You don't think so? Yeah.
A lot of wars since then.
You know, on the question of Eastern religions, about which I have nothing cogent to say, it better follow something like this logic, or Sachs's argument is more limited. Is he just talking about Western religions? And I don't know the answer to that. You would think that he would want to say, I want to say it more strongly. You would think he would say that his narrative does say that this is what happens to the development of groups They develop a groupishness, they begin to be altruistic toward themselves and antagonistic to others because of the scarcity of resources. What about God's love? You know, God loves us and not you. You would think he would say it's got to apply universally, but we know enough about the differences to make that a bit problematic. Maybe this is Western religion. I don't know. Yes?
Well, it seems to me that tribes who left Egypt formed tribes in Canaan, and religion came about because God saw that these tribes need to cooperate in order to survive.
Yes.
So if they perform this religion that they could all adhere to, that would give them the impetus to trust each tribe.
You're saying that God saw this need and gave them religion. It's interesting. I mean, I think the Christian narrative more or less says that God gave his only begotten Son so that we should have salvation, that God recognized we were in trouble and sacrificed something of God's self. Well, why not the Torah too? God gave us the Ten Commandments. We came out of Egypt. One could say that, you know, Hobbes's notion of the state of nature. Well, after we got out of Egypt, we were in the wilderness, which is a metaphor for the state of nature. And so God gave us the Torah. God gave us law as a gift. That's not, Sachs is not doing that here, right? Because he's really not talking about theology. He's talking about how violence emerges and for what purposes. Yeah, that's an interesting point here. Yeah. Below?
So when the Israelites left Egypt and they were promised the land, there were other people in the land already.
Yes.
And so it seems to me that a fight is almost unavoidable.
Yeah, right.
They were God and religion.
I should be repeating the questions because I think there are some people who are watching. So your point here is that when they crossed the Jordan River and went into the land of Canaan, there were already people there. And so war is inevitable. Yeah. And it was sanctified by God saying, this is the war I want you to fight, which is Linda's point about that. Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. So, wow. We are meeting again next week. And let's just assume we're going to read the next 45, 50 pages. I don't feel, at least at this moment, that I'll need to do the elaborate unpacking that I did. But let's try to read it, and we'll come back and try to move forward in this book. Great. Okay.
I'll just try to share.
All right, she's gonna do, all right. They're probably fine with being sitting on the cross. They have to be here anyway, so.
I think everybody's going on vacation this summer. Josh is not going on vacation.
No, he should get lots of rest.
What I think is more relevant is, let's talk about going from theory of modernity with the revolution.
Right now exists in this country and in the world.
That everything now is individualism instead of,
Like the technologists, right?
well, even technology is part of it. You know, 100 years ago, coming into the modern age was all about
In terms of
making life easier for
thinking that they're worried about
builders,
what they're against,
cars, electricity, and
they're against
cities formation,
the
you know, all of
the
that
acceptance of LGBTQ, they're against,
grew progress.
they're,
But now,
you know, I think this really
what's happening is
scholarly friendly.
people talk about individuality,
Um,
and that's where
comes
the
from
feelings
and
of
family, but she's,
sexual identity come into place.
she's
Nobody talked
got
about that
very
before.
smart.
It may have existed, it did exist, but nobody acknowledged it. And so, isn't it, I mean, it's truly amazing that it's a thing
But then she got law
nowadays.
degree.
And 50 years ago, it
Well,
was
it was
so under,
The survival of the family is so important. They're against religion, so.
well, what do you mean they're against religion? I
Because
think God doesn't
those
call us
values were represented by the Republican
Right,
Party.
those,
So a lot of
those
these things,
laws that
in
you're
a way,
talking about, that you
that's
mentioned,
what
were written
protected
by religious people
friends
who
since
believed it.
1979.
It doesn't make it,
But
it doesn't make it right.
all of a sudden, when it's a political situation, you have to worry about to admit things.
Right, I mean, it's part of Catholicism. But it's part of it, I think that you can point to some of those things in Judaism too. But that's why Sachs is talking about the stuff he's talking about. There are other influences much, much worse than religion that have influenced where we're at today. And I think that he's
Well,
right.
it's interesting because I've noticed that too,
But I don't know,
He's kind
and
of,
I don't explain
he's
it.
kind of, you know,
I watched somebody
gone
on
around
around
like,
something
that John needs to go.
Well, they have a whole thing on,
I
China,
probably,
on robots.
you feel
that
more
are-
with your husband
everything.
about that.
Not only
I just,
follow directions. Things out. And they can replace people, and eventually they're in a stink.
So if you go to Phoenix, there are driverless cars all over the streets in Phoenix, Arizona. Because that's where Intel is, and that's where they're developing
It's
that.
gonna happen to our future.
It's not important, that's a bunch of zeros and ones, and people that know how to calculate that, it's part of enlightenment.
No,
And what we're talking about now is something here, not
but
something
what
here.
I'm saying is that when people are out of work,
I heard somebody say, I heard somebody say that, I had this discussion
still need people
Is
for the
violence
machinery.
inherent
And so,
with
but there's certain, and so that's drives, or, there may not be laws, you may be ordering things by, like Amazon, you know, I mean,
I don't think I remember the last time I was in the beach.
whatever one of those, like, either, bike goes on, you can't drive on, you can't feel on. If you know what you're getting, then you're happy, then, you know, but I always try to, in nice stores, but that's not a good excuse for, and I'm not speaking for,
Well, I think my daughter was shooting in a store. I mean, I have a lot of clothes, because I have 3 closets full of clothes.
oh,
I don't know.
well, that's another thing, too, right. You know what, I'm feeling like I could kick myself if we haven't bought the dress I did, because it like was expensive, I never wear it again. The dress I bought for the wedding, and even the one I bought for the ceremony, I bought two, it was a little pantsuit. It's almost too dressy to wear to temple. I'll wear it. My stepdaughter's, it was my step-granddaughter who got married. Stepdaughter's daughter. And it was a complicated result of fear because, she had an identity crisis and she lived in an institution for a couple of years. And she's come back and she's healthy pay attention to it, put it in an email. I can't always do that.
So these
Sometimes it
cousins
takes me a
ended
little
up in
while.
Sweden,
And so I wouldn't bother.
and then
I tried.
their mother,
I sent it to him, but I
who
was
was our grandmother's sister.
It's a stupid thing to be proud about, but
She had
kids will try.